Every great creative work stands on the shoulders of giants. Welcome to RetroInspection, where we examine and find out where the things we love today came from.
Today we're talking about Fantomas. Nick, give us a little backstory on this novel, this character, this series of books.
Okay, so it's a French novel published in 1911, co-written by Marcel, Allain, and Pierre Souvestre. They wrote, we'll get to that in a minute here, actually. Overall, there are 32 books in the original Fantomas series. However, most of those were written by Allain. Souvestre died in the first year of World War I. He was serving in that. Allain survived, also did, I believe, but he survived the war. And they concern a master criminal slash serial killer known only to the general public as Fantomas, and his pursuit relentlessly, by a French Surete detective named Juve. Now, both of these guys are masters of disguise, which causes a little bit of narrative confusion because they're always like popping up in different guys. You're never entirely sure who's who, and it gets to be a little bit of a hairball. You're about to say.
So Fantomas and Juve are the masters of disguise.
Yes.
Okay.
So, so Juve spends these 32 books chasing him around, and they did write, and other authors have written some since then in the modern day featuring this character. And I think over in Europe, there's been comic books. There were a couple of movies in the 60s. There was definitely a silent movie back long about 1912. I think it's on YouTube. It's the one we watched.
And we'll provide a link for that.
Yeah. So you can check that out as well. So you want me to talk about my idea here?
Well, no, I want to talk more about Fantomas first. So,
okay.
How did you like the book?
It's kind of rough sledding for about the first half. And I don't know if that's a byproduct of the writing process, because I can't tell you what their writing process was. You see, a lot of things where it's co-authored, a common method is to switch off chapters. That's what Warren Murphy and Richard Sapir did when they were writing the Remo Williams novels. They would just trade chapters. I don't know if that's what these guys did, but it's kind of disjointed until really we get into the back half of the book and all of the various elements start to pull together, and you begin to see, I was about to describe it as Fantomas' master plot. He doesn't really have one. He steals, yes, he needs money. He has henchmen at some remove. We see very few of his henchmen on stage. He's the leader, supposedly, of a group of what they called in France at the time, Apaches, which were just sort of like loosely organized street criminals. Nothing quite so formal as the mafia, but they were, a lot of independent gangs running around. Because Fantomas kills for pleasure. That's why I used the term serial killer about him a few minutes ago. He commits extremely gruesome murders. He kills people he doesn't even have to kill in the course of getting money, and he lets some other people live, for example, that he robs. It's entirely arbitrary. He operates and kills according to whim. So, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call him that. And it differentiates him from some of his fellow, arch criminals / super gangsters, whatever you want to call them, that were contemporaneous.
Let me ask you this question about Fantomas. So, he is a master of disguise, and throughout this novel, which for me, to be fair and honest, listen, we're not really going to spoil an well over 100-year-old book.
Yeah.
But for the first 3 or 4 chapters, I would not have kept going unless you had told me to keep going, because it was disjointed. Yes. I didn't know what narrative voice I was listening to, but then something flipped, and that after the the murder of the Baronet. Then the narrative kind of opened up. Before that, it seemed like they didn't really know, and this is probably part of that function of how they wrote this. Maybe one guy wrote one chapter, or maybe he wrote one half chapter and handed it off to the other author. But it didn't seem like they were on the same page until after that murder, and then the book opened up and became quite interesting. Let me ask you this about the book. It is quite gruesome.
Mm-hmm.
The ending is startlingly gruesome.
Bleak.
And bleak, yeah. In light of how people view this kind of fiction today, how do you think it was received then? Obviously, it became this very hugely popular phenomenon in France and Europe, and then crossed over into the United States. But weren't these people Victorians? Didn't they have a different kind of morality? What was going on there?
Well, I think you would have to allow for differences in taste between the UK and France and Germany and the United States. So continental Europe, you were probably getting away with some stuff that you weren't getting away with in the UK or in the United States in terms of like your crime fiction and the depiction of violence. I'm hard pressed to think of anything in the US or UK that was contemporaneous, where you're seeing this level of violence. On the other hand, murders in the Rue Morgue, the Edgar Allan Poe thing in the 1840s, one of the Dupas stories. That giant orangutan that's running around killing people is cutting people's heads off. It is a tool-using primate, and one of the tools he uses is a great big old knife, and it decapitates one woman and murders another by stuffing her up a chimney. So, there's your groove, but that's earlier, that's pre-Victorian. I don't know how much of it, I guess that makes some difference. But I think somebody is going to be, where were these novels published versus where were they not published? And in France, you're probably getting away with some stuff that you're not getting away with, say, in Great Britain.
Like, subscribe, repost, share everywhere. To see what else we're up to, visit xynobooks.com, xenobooks.com.